Yay! Greetings, cowboys and cowgirls. What's up? How you doing? How you doing? The ether. This is like screaming out Satan in the middle of a church. When you're talking to modern academic scientists who are not scientists by definition and denotation, what they are mathematicians, i.e. atomists. The most evil word is the word ether. Now, when it comes to Mother Nature, and of course Mother Nature is not a person, we're talking about natura naturans, right? Mother Nature doesn't give a crap if you call it zero-point energy or the ether or counter space or a non-Cartesian inertia. The original definition of inertia, not the current connotation of inertia. The ether is absolutely undeniable. Interesting little experiment that you could do. I was trying to think, like without having a bunch of equipment as far as proving the ether, what's the most simple way to prove the ether? Like you could have like a little bar bet. Okay, but your buddies would actually have to look up the complex, or not that complex, equations for calculating magnetic field strength and its variance at distance. In other words, how far you get away from a magnet, right? Right? Now let's just say we were in outer space. A vacuum, no, outer space is not a complete and total vacuum, but we don't even have the air to contend with, no oxygen and nitrogen molecules. So let's just say this experiment is done in outer space. Well, we could do this on Earth, obviously so. All you need is a decently large magnet, like a 2-inch by 2-inch by 1-inch. You can get those for $40 now. Neodymium iron boron, N50 Gauss is a block magnet. I got a pile of them. They're really dangerous. They're so much fun to experiment with. And like an old tube TV set, you know the type, just turn it to a black channel or a white channel or a static channel. Okay, you could step the hell back up about 20 feet. But let's first start off by saying something here. Speaking of magnetic field intensity, how it varies with distance, we're talking about like the maximum distance on that 2-inch by 2-inch by 1-inch as measured in inches, okay? In other words, how much influence we've got is about yay far. If you actually apply the calculation for magnetic field influence, okay, or strength at distance, we're talking about yay far, right? Okay, so that's the maximum distance which we have the ability to have a variance like on a Gauss meter of influence of static field. Now, an active field, of course, is in relationship to Maxwellian field equations, a output over a given period of time and a known vector. Of course, the output would be joules, watts, volts, so on and so forth. Maxwellian field equations, of course, never define a field. The interesting thing about the ether, however, and I'm going to get to the experiment very, very quickly here, is that modern physicists also admit to the ether. However, it's the most evil word to them. They absolutely deny it outright. With the Michelson-Morley experiment, never denied the ether. It's a completely absurd experiment. Absolutely as absurd as the Schrodinger's cat thought experiment. Completely baseless and groundless nonsense. But anyway, supposedly Michelson-Morley experiment refuted the ether, but of course it did no such thing. But modern scientists actually who cannot reconcile EPR, look up EPR if you like, or instantaneous action at a distance, they still admit to the ether, except they actually hide it in euphemisms. They call it quantum foam or quantum fluid, or there's about 6 different things that modern quantum and the physicists actually refer to the ether without using the word ether, because the ether is literally the big evil Satan/devil word in physics. You just don't say that stuff. You just don't like speak the word Satan, you know, in the middle of church, right? It's the same thing with the word ether. Its connotations are literally that deep. And of course, there's been 1,000 different philosophies and metaphysics on the ether dating back to the ancient Greeks and even further. But the ether is, of course, ever present and undeniable. Now to the experiment. All you have to do is have a tube TV set, old tube TV set, and one of those little 2-inch magnets, or even one larger than that. Now we know that a given magnetic influence with distance, you've only got influence about that far. That's off a static field. All you actually have to do is sit there and wave that magnet 2 inches or larger at 20 feet plus. If you actually have a little spotting scope at, like, say 30 feet plus or even 40 feet, you can still see the influence. You can actually get back with a spotting scope, since you can't see the TV set at 40 plus feet, not in really fine detail like I get my eye up against this computer screen, but 40, 50 feet back with a spotting scope, okay? You can wave that magnet just like this, and that you will actually see influence. Now, of course, the TV tube is nothing other than an electrostatic generator. Okay, so then a vacuum tube striking a RGB array. Depends on which type it is. We're just talking about an old tube Sony or some old tube TV set, which you probably have one in your basement. Most people have thrown them away now. If you ever want to, like, have a bet with somebody, say, let's just go off the known calculations for magnetic influence with distance. It falls off completely as palpably measurable about yay far. I said, what if I could actually cause a magnetic influence and prove the ether? And if you're able to go into space in a total vacuum, someone would say, well, this is the influence of the magnet upon the air molecules, the oxygen and nitrogen, and it's transferring. That's not what's happening. But even if you were to go in a total vacuum out into space with a tube TV set and you in your space suit, you would still see the exact same influence. You'd actually see it more because you'd have no influence of the dielectric permittivity and the magnetic permeability of the nitrogen and oxygen separating between you and the tube TV set. What this does when you're actually waving the magnet is you're setting up a field perturbation and a strain in the hysteresis of the ether. Let me repeat that very succinctly, okay? Not using like gobbledygook words here. You're setting up a strain in the hysteresis and the stasis of the ether. No different than a little bitty person. Well, what sort of influence does a little child have in the middle of a pool? You know, how much influence? Because a little child's arms are about yay long, right? Right? How much of an influence could a child have in the middle of a pool, flapping his arms? You know, of course, the water would be analogous to the ether. Well, quite a long way if you actually had the hysteresis of the ether, in this case the calm waters of a large Olympic-sized swimming pool. You know, a little child could flap his arms and create little waves against the edges of the pool, you know, 50, 100 feet out, right? Even further. You could actually back up. Of course, you'd have to step outside of your house or put the TV set down the end of the street. Okay? You can, as far as I've seen, it has been 80 plus feet. You have to have a little spotting scope or a pair of binoculars, right? I'm sure you got a pair of binoculars. Put it down the street. Okay, take the binoculars up to your eyes. Do this with the magnet, right? You will see the influence on that electrostatic, dielectric, electrostatic, same thing, projection on the phosphorus-coated screen of that old tube TV set, you know, from 50, 60, 80 feet away. If you want to stick the TV set down at the end of the street, your neighbors might look at you like you're a nut job. But you know, this runs contrary to what science says about the influence of distance of a given Gaussian flux magnet. It's both its volume and what it's rated at in a Gauss meter. So, well, it's okay. This magnet is, you know, 0.4 Tesla, and it has a volume of, you know, 40 square centimeters. Actually, that's not the volume of a 2 by 2 by 1 inch. Point being is that the ether does exist. I'm trying to think of a really simple experiment that you could use to prove to people. With the known given math of magnetic field influence, this, of course, is not possible. But science doesn't admit to the ether, but the ether is, everything is the ether. Absolutely everything is the ether is undeniable. Trying to deny the ether is like trying to enjoin a self-negation paradox, because subject precedes the object of negation. Denying the ether is absolutely ridiculous, because science itself has never defined a field. Maxwellian field equations, for example, only define a field over a vector with a period of time with a given result. Maxwellian field equations never define a field itself, in itself, by itself. What is a field? Ancient Greek word kora. Modern science has never defined a field. Never. You will find no definition of a field anywhere. Go to Wikipedia, go anywhere. Just find a definition of field. The answer for what a field is very simplex. It's an ether perturbation, which takes on 4 different modalities depending on how you look at it. We have gravity, electricity, magnetism, and dielectricity. Of course, there are really only 2 fields. There's dielectric and magnetic, and ultimately that's reducible to 1 because magnetism is the extrapolation of the dielectric field with the loss of inertia as manifests as force and motion. Centrifugal divergence, i.e. force and motion. Of course, the dielectric is counterspatial. Magnetism is spatial. 100% of the universe only has volume due to magnetism and magnetism only. The ether is an absolute. The ether is undeniable. Even the idiot scumbags of quantum mechanics believe in the ether, but they don't use the word ether. They call it quantum fluid. I can't remember the 4 other names that they use, but they still admit to the ether because you can't explain the universe with bumping particles. It's absolutely impossible. The only thing that can explain, like light slowing down, of course light doesn't move at all, it's a rate of induction, and speeding back up without breaking the law of conservation of energy after leaving glass or water, is ether. Everything is capacitance, resistance, magnetic permeability, and dielectric permittivity. You can't explain these things with damn particles. The universe is not bumping particles. And that's why I call quantum the cult of bumping particles. When you deny the ether, okay, and modern physics is only a theory. When you deny the ether, then you must replace it with something else, and that's something that it has been replaced with. It's not my opinion, this is what they say, is bumping particles. It's the cult of bumping particles. The only problem with that is it's illogical, it's contradictory, it doesn't explain given phenomena. Only the ether explains that. Only the ether can explain not breaking the law of conservation of energy, of light speeding back up, and countless other phenomena, instantaneous action at a distance, electromagnetic retardation. That's what it's actually called. EMR, electromagnetic retardation. The universe is extremely simple, but it's not simplex. But the picture that's painted of cosmic mechanics by modern physics and quantum is illogical, absurd, and the brainchild of a bunch of atomistic, insane fools. The ether is undeniable. I guess that's the end of this video. There's a lot more I'd like to say, but I've been so damn busy today. I got like 10,000 things to do, and it's already 12 midnight. I never have enough time to do everything that I want to do. Thank you, and goodbye. Do 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 do.